Good morning, class. I'd like to talk to you this morning about the Puritans. And I have drawn very heavily upon a book written by Jenny Pulsifer entitled Puritan Fathers. And Jenny tells us that in order to understand the Puritans, you have to understand Henry VIII. Henry VIII ruled Great Britain, ruled England from 1491 to 1547, and he was only 17 when he became king. He very quickly married his brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon, and it was pretty much a political marriage. And they did have one daughter named Mary. Mary would be raised a Catholic. But Henry had a mistress named Anne Boleyn that he preferred to be married to. She was more attractive and younger than Catherine. And so Henry asked the Pope for a divorce. The Pope said no. It had been a public marriage. They had had a child. And so the Pope would not annul the marriage. And so Henry said, if you're not going to do that, I'm going to set up my own church, and I'll be the head of it, and I'll annul my own marriage. And that's exactly what Henry did. He divorced Catherine and married Anne Boleyn. And with Anne Boleyn, Henry had a daughter named Elizabeth. But there were some marital problems, and Henry had Anne beheaded. And Elizabeth, their daughter, would be raised as a Protestant in the Church of England. Henry would go on to marry 4 other women, and eventually, he died in 1547, and Mary came in as queen. Mary had been raised a Catholic, so she brought the church from the Church of England back to Catholicism, and required all of the clergy to convert. And those who didn't were often executed. In fact, according to Judith Richards in Defaming and Defining Bloody Mary, she says that Mary had 350 members of the clergy beheaded, and so the conversions moved very quickly after that. But the congregations were required to attend the new Catholic services, and Mary reigned for 5 years and then was replaced by her sister Elizabeth, who was a Protestant, had been raised a Protestant. Elizabeth brought back the Church of England and required the clergy to convert, and Elizabeth required all the citizens, the subjects, to attend their local churches. And as you can imagine, this was really jerking the congregations around, and some of the people didn't like converting back and forth, so they continued to practice their very simple religion, and these people were known as Puritans. One thing Elizabeth did was she required that anyone who was a preacher to get a license to preach. And so the Puritans were not able to get license for their ministers, and so authorities could easily see who wasn't at church on Sunday, go to their homes, and eventually discovered services, the Puritan services being conducted. Anyway, it was a very unsafe situation. Many of the congregations decided they were going to leave England. They moved to the Netherlands, and there, because of the circumstances, they prayed to God for guidance and promised to make a covenant with God that if he would take them to the new land, America, safely, they would agree to convert all the native Indians that they came in contact with. Anyway, that's exactly what they did, and according to Carla Prasanna, who wrote a book about the Quaker executions in the New World, the Puritans were very intolerant, but they continued on for a long period of time. Their very strong leader was John Winthrop, and about the third day after their arrival in this country, John got up in front of the men and made a very impressive speech about building a shining city on a hill and being a beacon to other colonies to follow. The Puritans disappeared. And why did they disappear? Well, because they had too many severe rules, too many strict rules. That you were punished if you didn't go to church, punished if you worked on the Sabbath, punished if your children misbehaved. So many of the people decided there must be an easier way to worship God, and they chose the Quaker religion or Baptist or fundamentalist, other religions, and eventually the Puritan religion died out. Thank you very much for your attention.